I'm going to call the meeting to order. And we'll do a roll call of members here. So Tim Davis, not present. Derek Goodwin, not present. Sean Keneally,
Present.
looking good, man. Martin St. John,
Right here.
Susan Bryant. I see you here, Susan.
Yes.
Lori,
Here.
Lisa Hewitt Dick,
Present.
Mike Sardina. Thank you. We have a quorum. For the members of the committee, I do have minutes. You want to take a look at that? Mike, everybody else have a copy? Huh?
Grab some.
All right. Okay, so we need to approve the minutes. Can I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of the minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Next on the agenda. So I may have, if you guys do have an extra copy of the agenda, and you want to see, take a look. So we do have a few things. What we're going through today is the climate resilience kickoff. Then we're going to have discussion with Mike Lane and Adam Donovan about lobstering, the current state of that. Susan Hoadley and Eamon O'Mara will be joining us for a Cohasset Wharf update at 7:45. They'll be doing that remotely. Then we'll touch on site visits that this committee has made to Cohasset Wharf and the Harbor Cohasset, followed by the launch plan for the Cohasset Harbor Rec Survey. And then our last scheduled topic is a discussion about the proposed dock extension at Mariners Park. So what I would like to do, there's a new initiative on climate resilience, kickoff and next steps, James Brook Watershed Coastal Flood Pathways. I've asked Mike, who is attending the meeting, to give a brief update on that. And then Montana, if you care to add what next steps are, if any, that'd be great. Mike, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I attended the meeting, the kickoff meeting, which also was a brief presentation by Woods Hole with some folks tuned in on Zoom from the engineers, Weston Sampson. I think that primarily the essence of the presentation was showing what could occur in 2030 and 2050 relative to sea level rise and the vulnerable parts of town with the high tides, with the sea level rise and what areas get flooded, water depths, all that kind of stuff. It was informative from a graphic standpoint, and there was a fair amount of discussion that took place, asking questions, etc. of what's his name, Nassan? Nasser from Woods Hole, who did the presentation live. Long and short of it is that the resiliency preliminary evaluations are looking for ways to block high water from getting into the Elm Street corridor, the James Brook corridor, Summer Street, parts of Border Street, parts of Margin. So they're looking at ways to try to do that. And preliminarily, they're looking at conceptual solutions, which include raising road elevations, particularly part of Elm and Cove and Summer, all the way up to South Main Street. I'm not exactly sure how much of Border Street is going to in that evaluation, because basically the part of Border Street which has no well, there's a relationship between higher roads and existing buildings.
Yeah.
And that's true of the neighborhood along Summer Street, etc. The recommendations, if I recall from initial studies, was that they're targeting an elevation of 12.8. 12.8 is based on the survey data, USGS survey data, 1998. To put it in perspective, most of Border Street is at elevation 8. Part of Margin Street at Stock Ridge is at 7. A lot of Cove Street is at 8. I'm recalling this from my involvement with looking at surveys for Elm Street and Border Street. There are high points on Border Street and on Margin Street that could be utilized at some point, but they're not part of their thinking at this point. So I think that it was informative. It was kind of scary. There was a fair number of people there. I think a number of them were from Summer Street. And there wasn't any pushback at all relative to the conceptual thinking, at least not yet. And we'll see where this takes us.
Mike, was this similar to the presentation that was made, to the Harbor Committee or to the public at the library?
Yeah, it was very similar.
Is this
Yeah,
the same?
except
Yeah.
it was a little more updated because they now
Okay.
had some conceptual thinking. And the conceptual thinking also included things like walls and what have you, like walls along Summer Street, which I don't quite understand how that works when you got driveways in Black Horse Lane that are obviously breaches. So, but anyway, we'll see how this all shakes out, where it goes from here.
So I attended it on Zoom and, it's basically, they're just peeling back layers of the onion.
Yeah.
This is now diving in
Mhm,
as the follow-on from where things ended up in June.
mhm.
It's based on a grant of $100,000 and change. And, I don't know when this is all said and done, but the actual construction work, if it were approved, would be lots of money.
I think the study's due in June or something. It was this summer, right?
Yeah, so right now we're just in the design phase. If we want to move further with implementation, that's applying for 2025, which is actually coming up this June. But that's all just dependent on how well we go with this grant cycle. So like, if you think about it, it's like they're all layering on top of each other. So last year was the first
Mhm.
year of doing field work study and like looking at what are the best viable options in terms of public safety, affordability, just in aligning with the town's interest. And then we broke off and we applied for 2 projects, which we are currently enrolled in right now with CZM. Woods Hole Group and Weston and Sampson is the one that had the public meeting, I guess 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point.
Yep.
And then there is another grant with Woodern and Curran, but that's mainly focusing on the wastewater treatment plant and critical infrastructure elevation projects. That was one of NASR's suggestions from the previous cycle, and so we partnered with Woodern and Curran to tackle that. Woods Hole and Weston and Sampson is now in the design phase of hopefully raising the roadways in the next 5 years, but again, that's if we are accepted for these grant cycles. It is a lot of money, so when the time comes to do the construction itself, it's gonna be multiple grants, probably from multiple different state funding opportunities. And that's, I'm not even gonna like open that door because it's so far down the road and things could happen where we decide to change pathways and whatnot. So, but that's basically like the overall next steps. Honing in on currently what's happening with Woods Hole and Weston and Sampson. We're doing boring surveys on Border Street and Summer Street, and we're just wrapping those up right now. Actually, if some of you live on Summer Street or South Main, you may have received a letter from us, just notifying you that there was construction going on last week, and there will be one next week or the following too.
Excellent.
Yep.
So the target finish with this analysis in 3 months, June, give or
Yeah.
take.
For both of them, and then we'll just keep applying, and the hope is that, I mean, CZM knows what we're doing. Jason Bertner, he's like in charge of all the funding. I'm sure most of you have probably bumped into him at some point if you do coastal zone management stuff. But he's seen us from the beginning. Nasser also does a lot of projects with coastal zone management, so they like to see progress, especially if things are building off each other and they can see the end goal rather than like imagining it, if that makes sense. So,
Terrific.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mike or Montana?
Is the meeting taped? I mean, it's gonna be on the,
It's posted.
okay, great,
Yep.
thanks.
Yeah, it just got posted last week because we also just got a new communications director, Kevin.
Great.
Hopefully, everyone will soon be introduced to.
Appreciate it.
This is the February 7th meeting? And is that, where do you find that on the website?
On the Cohasset YouTube page, like where the Harbor Committee recordings are and all committee
Okay.
and board meetings are.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Next on the agenda is a lobstering, fishing, aquaculture discussion. So we are pleased to be joined by two experts in this field, Mike Lane and Adam Donovan. Our objective with having this is for the Harbor Committee to get a better understanding of the current state of fishing and lobstering out of Cohasset Harbor based on the experience of these two gentlemen. What we've agreed to do is I'm sort of going to do this in a Q&A format, just to sort of guide the discussion. And we'll try and, I think we've allocated about 25 minutes for this. We'll try and do it 20 minutes or so and leave some time for questions. But again, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
So my first question, could you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the business, about your business, fishing, lobstering that you do for a living, and how long you've been doing it?
All right, so my name's Mike Lane. I've been lobstering out of Cohasset since I was a kid. My father lobstered out of Cohasset his whole life. He's recently passed away. So I've been doing it, God, over 40 years now, around 40 years. So I've targeted lobsters, scallops, pogies, dogfish, codfish, haddock. Tried all assortment, all sort of methods of trying to make money in the ocean.
Great.
Yes.
Adam Donovan, grew up in Cohasset, started lobstering about 20 years ago with a family friend and, just considered it like an itch I had to scratch, just kept wanting to go and go and go. And, I've been doing it for, had my own bigger boat now for 17 years, something along those lines. Yeah. Primarily just lobstering. I haven't ventured into any other fisheries.
Terrific. So this is a bigger question. How has your experience with commercial lobstering and fishing changed in the past 4 to 8 years? For instance, from the perspective of fishing and lobstering stock, government regulations, and from a business perspective, such as your costs, your revenues, supply chain. If you would, why don't you lead off, Mike?
Well, fishing, it's just a tough way of life nowadays. We've gone from, I would say I had probably my 3 best years in the last 4 years. And then last year itself was probably one of the worst years I've seen. So to go from a tremendous amount of lobsters to seemingly nothing last year was concerning. It's, as I say, it's a tough way to make a living, but it's still, I've bounced around from so many things between lobster and lobstering's always been the main source of income. Scalloping was something I picked up 10 to 15 years ago. I was pogie fishing for the last 5 years, the same thing last year. Pogies just never showed up in this area. They just went right by us like everything else seemed to, for what reasons we don't know. Government regulations is one of the hardest obstacles we have to face in the lobster fishing industry. As you know, we have a 3 or 4 month closure right now. Just in really mass bay, but it really affects all Massachusetts lobstering.
You take down.
So like I said, I've bounced into the pogies, which, we did about 20 to 30 barrels of pogies a day for the lobstermen to use as lobster bait. I think 10 years ago, we had an abundance of dogfish, which we were allowed 2,000 pounds a day. So I went hooking for those, and we did that for a summer in between lobstering. We have crabs. It seems like the crab stock has bloomed in the last few years. I just had a meeting I went to the Lobster Town Hall up in Moncton where we discussed all things lobstering. We're working on a deal to sell crabs up to a processor. And he was just questioning like how many crabs you catch, and I just told him, I said, I hauled a 20-pot trawl the other day, I had 300 pounds of crabs out of 20 pots. So there's a potential for a future market there, but that's gotta be something that we work on to produce the market. So there's always been something to do in the ocean if you have the ambition.
What kind of crabs?
They're called Jonah crabs. So we catch those. We catch them everywhere, but they're mostly out in the deeper water and in the federal waters. You see them inside, but they're smaller. And they've just seemed to be a big, last 2 years, we just can't seem to get away from them. And if that's, one of the theories is that from global warming, the water's warming up and the stocks are shifting north, which is what everybody's saying. I mean, we've been told that about lobsters, but we had some tremendous years in the last 10 years. We had a boom of lobsters. So, it's hard for me to say that's, 1 year, one bad year doesn't mean that the lobsters are completely gone, but it is a concern. But there's always concern in fishing. We got Mother Nature, we have, the government was there again. So. Unless Adam has anything to add.
No, what Mike said is very true, and I say it's really tough to kind of pinpoint if you use a time frame of like 4 to 8 years, seeing change. Mother Nature has her own timetable, and from what I've seen from the beginning of my career to now is you just see different, like, we used to catch like flounder that were the size of doormats in the traps, and like, you pull it up, like, oh, you want this one? No, I don't, I'm not gonna cook it. And like, that doesn't happen anymore. When I first started, you would have to pull starfish off traps all day long. It was like my job was just to constantly pull them off, throw them over. I can't remember the last time I seen a starfish in my trap. So there's this constant, like, we're all like kind of like armchair marine biologists, because we see everything on our rail. We see all these species come up in the traps, and every so often you'll get like your anecdotal warm water species that comes up and gets stuck, and it's kind of interesting to see, the ebb and flow of the marine life. And you do get kind of concerned when you start to see maybe fewer juvenile lobsters in the trap, or you start to see more lobsters with shell disease, which is something that we're very concerned about. And I will say that the closure now is kind of having an effect on kind of what we see overall, because we're not there. So usually in the springtime, when we get going, these things are moving, and we can kind of like, okay, we can see this happening. And now we're like, we go into it more blindly, like with traditional data. Okay, well, this is where I'm gonna set the gear and hope to catch it, so we're kind of starting behind the starting line on that. And, from, the government regulation standpoint, the closure's been really tough. It's, people have to hustle, it's any type of commercial fishing is a large investment. And it's really tough to kind of say to yourself, all right, well, I've taken this huge leap of faith and put a lot of money into lobstering, and I got to go do that now with something else and put my neck that much further out on the line, So it's a balance, a constant balance, a constant struggle financially to try to figure out where everything wants to settle at the end of the day. And then, from like a cost perspective of running the business, again, Mike touched on it too. It's like, there are years, and I would say the past 2 have been like the cost of doing business, expensive bait, my boat insurance is crazy, like all these things have risen, but the price of lobster is kind of not really caught up to that. So you're constantly trying to adjust and, retain helpers and all that stuff. It's, it's a juggling act like any business is, it just has some more kind of quirky ends to it. So, you have to be able to be mobile, you have to be able to be flexible and react. And I think that will play in later when we start talking about infrastructure needs too. So that's kind of like, you know, the broad brush strokes of lobstering, I guess.
Just following up on the business side, do you sell everything you catch locally? And-
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Everything.
In the Cohasset Lobster Pound, how do you distribute what you sell?
I think Adam sells to Superior and I sell to Lobster Express, who's based out of Norwell and Hull.
So it's local lobster
So it
dealers
is
that
still
have
local,
their
but
markets.
And this stuff goes to Shaw's, it goes to Stop and Shop, it goes to Millennium,
mine-
where does it go?
my dealer does a lot of his down to, ships a lot to New York. Does a lot of restaurants down there, but he does a lot of business in New York. The lower quality lobsters, most of those get sent up and they're sent to Canada to be processed, because we don't have many processors in the United States, so the junk lobsters we catch in the summertime that really can't be shipped worldwide, head that way. And then my dealer has the shop up in Norwell, he sells local lobsters up there. So
And if you catch scallops or Jonah crab? what's the
scallops, well,
story with
like
that?
scallops last year, I actually sold off the boat at the dock for the first time, which, you know, we did like
Delicious.
a
by the
Facebook
way.
ad.
Yeah, I'm gonna say,
Little bait
Yeah.
scallops.
No, I catch sea scallops,
Oh.
not bay scallops, so I did that, and then there's an auction house down in New Bedford. That buys the rest of them. I go where I get the best price, and that's where I get the best price for the scallops. The pogies are usually sold to local fishermen. The dogfish, I went down to Bedford, there was one processor left down in New Bedford. That actually cuts dogfish still. I don't really know if we've caught those in 10 years.
Haven't seen one in 10 years.
No. So it's, you know, that's one of the biggest things that is affecting the industry that no one really knows about or talks about, is the lack of infrastructure, and the loss of infrastructure is what is really destroying the fishing industry, which no one seems to have a touch on. Once we lose infrastructure, it doesn't come back. You mean, look at South Boston and the Seaport District, which used to be full of fish cutting houses. There's a few left. Same with dogfish. We used to get $2 a pound for them back in the late 90s. When I went, we got 70 cents because one person left. So when you lose, like, you know, we're talking about the Cohasset lobster pound and moving that and going somewhere else. And, you know, if we start losing places, you know, and a lot of our stuff has to be near water level. Well, we need water access to keep lobsters alive. You know, it's a lot of, and, you know, it's just the price of everything, you know, the price of land and everything around the ocean is just skyrocketed, so our infrastructure gets pushed out and, you know, we take the loss, and that's one thing that's really hampering the loss, the fishing industry as a whole.
Thank you. Well, listen, we go on to next question. Have you considered expanding into agriculture such as seaweed farming, sugar kelp, oysters? You've already talked about Jonah crab.
Isn't this a touchy issue, though? I mean,
Are
I,
you gonna assume it?
it's a very, you know, I thought about going for an oyster lease. I remember when this was first going through, I asked the town of Situate years ago about this. I think me and Jamie Davenport were the first two to actually go to the town of Situate, because they had no clue what to do. So I was seriously thinking it. Yeah, and then I'm Sean Harris was selectman back then. He delivers the fuel, and he said, would love to get a lobsterman in Cohasset to go for a lease. And I said, Sean, I actually, me and my wife actually took winter, we did take a shellfish course on how to raise oysters. We spent, I don't know, 3 months taking a course. We did learn quite a bit. And my personal opinion is, you know, where it is, it's just, you know, I wouldn't put the money out because I think it's gonna get wiped out. And then you get the controversy surrounding these aquaculture farms now in Cohasset, and then, you know, I wouldn't want to touch it right now. I mean, I've looked into the state, I've thought about there's sugar kelp. I've looked into sugar kelp, which is one of the most nutritious plants in this plant that you can eat. They make spirulina out of it. They dry sugar kelp and you grow that on ropes. So you have to get a lease, and you have to put ropes out into the water and grow. Then you trim them every 2 or 3 weeks and bring it in and dry it out. And so I've looked into that. That's seems like a profitable aquaculture in the future. There was something called
Is that being deeper water though?
It wouldn't be where the oysters are, it would need a little deeper water, so like, you know, somewhere in the 20-foot range, I think. He was, I know up in Maine, they do it up in the
For light.
bays, you need, you need. You need,
Light penetration.
right, and you need the, you know, they can't be exposed to, you know, dry out in the sun, like the oysters like to be dry for a little bit to kill the growth. Then there was butter clams, which is actually it's a sea clam, but it's a baby sea clam, so it's a 1 year growth. So the oysters take like 2 to 3 years till they're mature. And butter clams, they call them, they're just sea clams at a young stage. And those will take 1 year to grow out, and that was no market for them, but they were pushing that. So I've looked into aquaculture, but it's there again, it's a very touchy subject in Cohasset, as you all know. So that's,
Well, let me ask on that. You mentioned earlier, you need infrastructure to make any of these things
Mhm.
you farm or fish work.
correct.
Any clue how the if you even wanted to go this direction, would you be hampered by a lack of infrastructure shoreside?
No, there's no lack, I mean, of infrastructure shoreside for, you know, doing oysters or
Right.
anything like that. I would think.
But sugar kelp or
Sugar
something like
kelp,
that.
you probably would be, because it's the same thing that I run into when I go pogie fishing, or when when we go pogie fishing, we have 20 or 30 barrels on the boat. That's, that's 10,000 pounds of fish. You can't drag those up that dock. That's why I go down to Situate and use the takeout booms down there. When I went dog fishing, there again, we get in, if it was low tide, dragging 40 boxes up that ramp at low tide, that's quite the workout. And my
After a
knee
long
is
day.
killing me, and there again, I'd head to Situate to use the takeout booms. I'd pay the charge down there and use their booms because they had the infrastructure, and sugar kelp would require more infrastructure because you're talking a lot of weight to take off the boat.
Mhm.
So that would hamper something like that.
Okay. Adam, any?
Yeah,
thoughts
so,
from
no, I think
perspective?
basically, yeah, so like the oyster situation as it stands now, I remember when that first started thinking like, oh, I'd be a perfect candidate. Why wouldn't I do this? Because it's a horrible business idea. And it kind of makes me frustrated that all these people got up in arms about it because Mother Nature's gonna take care of it in about, 3 or 4 years. It's not a good place to put money. So, and that's anytime you want to look at any sort of business is, investment wise, you make sure you're gonna have, mitigate risk or whatever. And it was just it's not a good idea. But yeah, like, certain other, we have to be diversified. Like we have to go into different fisheries. Like that is becoming more and more clear. And that's gonna require us to kind of invest on the shore side to some extent, and be a little bit more flexible there. So, we need to start to see that movement.
Are you able to pivot in the season, or once you've sort of set your course in May to lobster or to scallop, that you can't change course during the year, or
I pivot constantly.
do you?
No, it's a lot of it is going out again in the afternoons, like pogie fishing. I'll go out lobstering. I'll get home around 10 or 11, get back out there and catch pogies.
Okay.
Scalloping is seasonal. I only do that like this time of year. I just rigged the boat out the other day, and just because it's a conflict with lobster gear. So that's kind of seasonal. And the crab fishing, that's kind of year round, but there again, that's if that does emerge as a fishery, which I'm sure it will, the numbers that I'm seeing, it's just waiting for the infrastructure and the person to develop the markets. That will require, I know that requires holding facilities, and I just went through this 2 weeks ago, and I did ask someone down the pier about the Cohasset lobster pound, because with crabs dirty the water up so quick. You can't store them in a facility inland because you got to constantly change water because they dirty the water up so quick. And I wanted to know if we could use a Cohasset lobster pound as a storage facility if we got this crab market up and running. But there's a lease going on, and I didn't want to get wrapped up with the guy who was taking the lease right now. So we ended up finding a place down in Plymouth at Jesse's Marine. He's got old tanks, and he said if there's a market, he'll get the tanks up back and running for it. But there again, he's right on the water, so he's got water quality, he got water he can suck right out of the ocean. Every week or so to change water and to keep it clean for the crabs, because you can't really mix crabs and lobsters into the same tank. Because they cause, I don't know, what is in the crabs that they give off ammonia? or-
I mean,
It's a-
some kind of nasty, like.
Yeah. And there again, it's, you know, if you get
Delicious,
them,
though. It's good, they're good eating.
they're hard to keep on the boat, especially in the summertime, but the water being so warm, so the boats would require chillers or aerators. And then once you get them there, it's a, you know, it's a rush to get them to market to keep them alive. You know, you need refrigerated trucks, there again, infrastructure to take it off. If you're talking 3, 4, 5,000 pounds of crabs every day, there again, you can come down and help me drag them up the ramp. It's
Yep.
just, you know,
You're leading to the next question.
Time is money.
yeah.
So let's talk to that. So what potential changes to Cohasset Harbor infrastructure, such as the conveyor or changes to Government Island Pier, would make a difference in your business? Let's start with Adam. We'll let you lead.
All right, so yeah, so I was trying to think about, you know, we've been working on this since 2016, I think was the first type of meetings we started to have about maybe coming up with some new plans. So it's been 8 years. Went through, you know, a harbor plan that we developed and is supposedly going to be implemented now. So like there is a level of frustration when I'm asked about infrastructure because we've been at it for a while. And I think what realistically, what we need, aside from climate change and raising Government Island, which has to happen. But what has to happen now is that we need mechanical booms or a conveyor belt or something to help us get this, any product we bring in up the ramp. Quickly mention too, we're lobster fishing, which is, you know, the majority of everyone's income down in Cohasset Harbor. We have a season, so we have to set gear and retrieve gear, and that takes time. So for me to get my gear in and out of the water is basically on either side of the seasons, it's 10 days. So it's 10 days to get everything up and running, 10 days to take it home. If I can get that down to 5 and 5, that's 10 extra days that I can be profitable, which really add up. So, you know, when we start to look at that stuff, like it's, you know, we look around at different harbors and you see infrastructure down there and, you know, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but just to have some modern facilities would be really helpful for the fleet.
How about you?
Yeah, I think the plan that we had, Lori and, who's the
Carlos.
Carlos
Yeah.
design, I thought that was a economically sound, very simple plan that had a lot of merit.
This is the Government Island Pier
Government
or the
Island-
conveyor?
No, the Government Pier plan that they designed through the Seaport District. I thought that was one of the best designs I saw. It was simple. It did everything that I needed. I know a lot of guys like the conveyor as a belt, but personally, I prefer the hoist system because just everything I've done down in Situate, it's night and day. I mean, unloading barrels of bait, loading barrels of bait, unloading fish in boxes or vats. Just, I mean, you're not putting any effort at all. I watch the guys down there unload lobster traps now. If we don't make the tide in Cohasset, we're lugging them up the ramp one at a time. You know, 800 traps, you do the math. If, you know,
50 pounds a piece, starting at 50.
those guys hook up 10 traps, they winch them up and they drop them right in their trucks. It's a one-step process of right into their trap trailers where we drag them up, we stack them, we take them out of the stack, put them either on our trucks or our trailers. So we handle stuff 3 to 4 times compared to these guys do it once. I mean, I look at my buddy's truck at Fish Out of Situate. It's like brand new. You look at mine and it's the same age. You think it's been through, you know, in a war zone. Because, you know, I watch them, the bait truck is right there at the pier. They don't even put a bait in their truck. I put a barrel of bait in my truck. I get to the pier, I dump it out to put it in boxes to be able to move it. And then I handle it. I handle that 3 times, dragging it down the ramp. We're monkeying around with these guys. Boom, pick it up, drop it down. End of story, days off. I mean, you know, we're talking barrels of bait are around 300 to 400 pounds. These aren't something that's easy to muscle around in the beginning of the day. So that's, and everybody in the harbor, we do the same thing. And down Situate, they told those guys down there, like, we don't want you dumping the barrels out anymore down here because you're making a mess. Like, because everybody down there just lowers them right into the boat. They said, go to your own pier and dump them because it's making too much of a mess down here. We don't want it. So that's the system I prefer. I know it's gonna be a big ask for the town now, I guess, with, the spending that's been going on. But, I just, we have an aging fleet. The guys are getting older. I'm still considered a young guy down there, I think, So anything to make their lives easier, I think, a lot of the guys would enjoy, not having the stress of, setting the gear and bringing it in. That's a huge task in our lives, is setting and bringing gear, and you don't understand how much effort it takes. The planning that it takes, I think me and Joe Barrow's the ones that fish the longest. We kind of wait for everybody to bring their gear in before we start bringing our gear in. So we kind of do the bums rush in the last 3 weeks of the season, and if you ever go down at 10 o'clock, you'll see Joe Barrow's unloading gear at 10 o'clock because he waits for the tide, because he won't drag them up. So our lives work around the tides in Cohasset.
Sure.
Other harbors you just work around a normal schedule.
So let me just go back on the conveyor, because I know, Lori, we've gotten some funding to potentially put a conveyor in. You say you prefer a hoist, but would,
At this point, I'd take anything.
I was wondering, how would the conveyor, if we did put in the conveyor sooner rather than later, how would that affect?
Oh, yeah, a conveyor belt would make my life a lot easier. It's a lot easier than dragging lobsters up the ramp. I mean, thank God the guy that I sell to comes on the pier and usually sends a young kid down who will help me drag the lobsters up at the end of the day. So that's, that kind of helps. But at this point, anything's better than nothing. And we do have a pier that's 200 years old. I mean, when's the last time that pier was when was that pier built? A couple of years ago?
Well, at least
It was built for Minus Light, right?
Yeah,
The shale from Miles Light.
I mean, I look around at like Situate Harbor and the work that they've done on that harbor. I mean, they're talking about doing the pier over again. I look down at Brant Rock and I know they use the same funding. They've rebuilt the whole pier system, and there again, they're talking about reworking some things out. So they're on a second build. And we can't even get started on a first build. It's frustrating. And I feel like the fishermen are just used as a pawn in this whole game. I mean, we got railroaded 4 years ago with the build with that build on the other end of the harbor with the condo units. I feel like they tried to use us. I mean, they did use us. They talked about us and used us, tried to get their Chapter 91 rules rewritten. They tried to use the same process. They're kind of using us in the Atlantica build. They talk about, we're gonna do this for the fishermen, and everybody's checking the right box, and we're the pawns again. We, tug on the heartstrings of the community about the lobster fleet, but the lobster fleet hasn't gotten anything in 2 generations. Sad. And I don't think fishing isn't going anywhere. You're gonna have these young guys that wanna go. I mean, every other harbor seems to be a thriving commercial fishing fleet.
are you seeing young guys,
Oh, yeah.
guys coming in?
We got a few young guys coming in, but you gotta understand, like, the age of the lobster in Cohasset right now, a lot of guys get in at the same exact time. So that's why
Right.
you have the guys that are between 60 and 70 years old right now. A bulk of the fishermen are just on that older, getting on their, the ends of their careers. But that's because they all got in at the same time. And the generation that I grew up with, they're all gone now. So, and I did do a little investigating because as we talk about funding for this pier, now we know that we have the Port Infrastructure Development Program just passed by Biden this year, which is for builds just like this for the commercial fishing industry.
Okay.
So we have another avenue of revenue source. If I did
Funding
call
source, yeah.
funding source, yeah. I did call Joe and Machino's office yesterday and today and talk to them, and they had no idea what I was talking about. So I informed them, and they were gonna look into it for
Okay.
me. So there is hopefully another source of
Potential funding for the
Potential?
pier.
for the pier. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it
Yeah,
out there. I know
sure. I
did a little
know,
investigating today to
And you
Yeah.
told me earlier when we talked, you attended a congress, was a lobstering congress or?
Oh, the lobster town hall up in Moncton that I attended.
Okay,
That was 2 weeks ago. And I got
and you
this,
do that, that's something you do on an annual basis or?
we do that every year, yeah. We do that and it's just, the whole lobster industry meets up from Canada to, as far as New Jersey, this to catch lobsters in New Jersey. And we just go over everything lobsters. And we talk, same thing, we talk about climate change, the stock. The stock is in tough shape right now, they say, and everybody's had a bad year, so we have 2 gauge increases coming in the next 3 years. We're gonna up the minimum gauge for the lobsters to help the stock. We could possibly have a trap reduction, that's been in the talks. Then we have right whale issues that we're working on and trying to figure ways around and through it.
Mhm.
We've done a lot of work to help the right whale in Massachusetts, and I think, we have led the way, just so, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Be somewhat proud of that. So,
Do we know how Situate and Grant Rock have been able to fund their improvements?
they've all been through the Seaport Fund.
Seaport Economic
Seaport
Council.
Economic Council.
Fund, yeah.
Have coughed up a fair amount of their taxpayer dollars though, too, right?
I'd assume so. But it's all, like if you look at the Situate Town Pier, it's, and all the seawalls they've rebuilt using those funds. And we all talk about climate change and rising tides,
I think they've
seas.
even done lighting too through the econ.
The lighthouse?
No, the lighting.
Oh.
Too.
Oh, so you can do it.
Yeah, there's
Lighting.
it's not just,
It's not just one,
Yeah.
you can keep going back and doing different projects and stages, so.
What's the size of our lobster fleet compared to Situate and compared to Grant Rock?
What do we have, like 30 boats, Lori? No, in the summertime?
We were about 16, 17.
All right.
That are active.
We
Okay,
have, Situate's
Part-time and full-time.
Situate's a big, that's a bigger harbor, so they have
Right.
more boats.
bigger boats.
No, the same, same
Are they?
size, but we do have a smaller fleet.
Yeah.
That fishes, because, Cohasset has the ledges and that's always been
Right.
an attraction for a smaller fleet. But we compete with, our boats
Yeah.
compete with everybody else, and Brant Rock actually has a very large commercial fishing fleet. If you have been to Brant Rock, I mean, they take up most of the harbor. So,
What other questions?
Just a quick one. Mike, you mentioned regulations, government regulations a couple of times, and I can imagine that's really onerous. Have they been worse recently? Has there been recent changes in the regulations, or is it just the fact that they're bad, period?
that's a loaded question. Yeah, it's-
Sorry, I didn't mean to do
They-
that.
well, What we're facing in Massachusetts, and especially the South Shore, is
Mhm.
the closures for the right whale. It's just hampering the lobster industry. If you, 10 years ago, when it went into effect, they didn't close down state waters. So state waters was open and we were above the line. So where our lobster in the wintertime was still open.
Okay,
So as the years have gone on, our closures have gotten longer in time and size. And I'm on the take reduction team, which sets the rules for the right whale problem. And the last round of rulemaking that I sat through was horrifying
Hmm.
for the lobster industry. It was gonna be devastating, which, Susan Collins stalked through the omnibus bill. That just delayed it, so it's gonna come back up in 3 more years. But what scared me the most was we were gonna lose January lobster fishing industry, and that one would really hurt. That's what they originally wanted when they closed this down, was they wanted January through in the end of April.
Hmm.
And they pretty much told me, because in order to reduce reduction, you need blue lines and you need whales, and we have both in January. So that would really hurt us, us and the South Shore. We're really getting hampered. I fished next to the Gloucester guys. And I was bringing gear home the other day, and those guys had their boats loaded up and they were just going north. They weren't going home with the gear. They were going to set it somewhere where it was open, so
yeah.
it's really affecting.
So it has become more restrictive. in a
It's
lot.
gotten, so it's grown
Yeah.
in size,
Mhm.
just area wise, and then the state, when the state closed down, the state doesn't open up till May 15th.
Earliest, May 15th.
Right.
Wow.
And if you know anything about lobsters, they move in April and May, and then June is the month that they shed. And then June was usually the month that we work on the boats. We go lobstering, but it's more, we always call it changing the water. We gotta wait till they shed and they start moving again, so. We start with our, kind of our hands tied behind our back, so it does get tougher. And the theory was we'd catch the same amount of lobsters in a shorter time period, but that hasn't proven
Play out.
true. So,
Thank you.
So is the restricted area include all the way to the shoreline though?
Mhm.
yep,
Because from
Mhm.
Doctor's Island down to
you can't set a
Smith
buoy,
Rock, that whole line of
you
outer.
can't set a lobster trap inside the Gulf River. Which make, and then it's funny, cause I was going out the other day and I see the buoys for the aquaculture. And I go, how can they have buoys when we're not allowed to have buoy lines? I couldn't go set a lobster trawl right there. Like green crabs, my buddy's been green crabbing. You can't go fish for green crabs up in the rivers because of the right whale, which makes absolutely no sense, but that's what the rulemaking and the commercial fishing, it doesn't make any sense anymore. It's just,
It's because the lawyers are writing the rules.
you get too many people, you got more people making the rules than actually fishing nowadays. That's the problem. And the whole fishing industry, that's why I said that question you asked me is very. We could spend weeks talking about that. It's,
No, thank you, though. That's helpful.
yeah, no, it's just,
Yeah.
it's the worst part of the fishing industry. It's, like I said, we have enough problems with Mother Nature. And you add
Government.
Closures on, yeah.
government rulemaking process on top of it.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Hey, listen, I want to thank you guys. This has
Yeah.
been.
Thank you.
really-
Yeah.
All right.
Fabulous.
You don't need to leave,
Yeah.
so feel free to stay, but thank you so much
All right.
for this conversation.
Can I
That's
just
wonderful.
ask, do we know what the current status is of the conveyor belt or the pier? Are they on hold or are they in a slow moving funnel of productivity?
Lori, do you want to answer that or not?
I'm hoping that we will be installing the conveyor belt sometime this summer. At Government Island. That's my hope. I don't know what stage the pier is at. I think it's a funding issue. It's estimated to be about $4 million and the town doesn't have $4 million. So, we've got to find funding revenue sources to pay for it.
But hearing about the conveyor belt and the possibility that's good news, if it can happen.
I'm hoping it will.
And so the conveyor belt there's funding reserved for it and it's available and ready to, do we have the design and all that? Like,
Oh, yeah, that was done a few years ago. The funding is there to purchase the conveyor belt. We have to reword the town meeting article for the electrical work. It stated for Fisherman's Pier, Fisherman's Dock. We have to change it to Government Island. So we can spend the money. It's already been appropriated for the electrical work.
Okay. Something
anything-
town meeting can do
Town meeting,
in
yeah.
June.
It's
So,
on the warrant,
good.
supposed to be.
and so that's, I was gonna ask, is there anything that we can do to help? And it sounds like if it's on the warrant, at least we can make people aware of that and that, if you like lobsters and if you like our charming harbor to have beautiful boats of wise people who know a lot about the sea, then they should support, right?
Yeah. No, good question, Susan. Thank you. Did that address your question, Susan? Thank you. Thank you again. We'll move to the next agenda item. I think we have Susan Hoadley and Eamon standing by. So next on the agenda, we have a 15 minutes update on the Cohasset Wharf project. And we'll welcome Susan and Eamon online. Are they, I can't see them, but are they here?
Name there.
Susan's here. There you go.
Oh, Oh, there, hi Susan, we can see you.
Hello.
And she's able to share a screen if she needs to, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Susan, you're a little faint, but that may be my. Okay, can you?
Yeah, testing, 1, 2. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
we're good. We can hear you.
Very
Thank
good.
you. And we can see the screen. That looks great.
Good, thank you. A little bit of advanced apology. I've got a dog who has decided to start barking now for the first time all day. So I will apologize in advance for that, should it happen. I'm also joined here by Karina Martinez, who is on this project as I am, but she'll be here to pick up any technical questions that might come up. Eamon is not on the call.
Okay,
It is, and neither do I see Nino DeNuno, who is the contractor and the person who can address specific scheduling and other items, but I will do my best to carry it through. So one week ago, we had a great walkthrough with members of the committee. We walked all around the site. And everyone can see the existing aerial photo that's posted now. Yep.
yep,
Okay, good. So as everyone knows, from going by, this is the pre-construction Atlantica complex aerial photo. And Karina, if you could just run the mouse over as I speak. This front area is been disassembled. And as everyone knows, the mantra of this project is smaller and better. So as you see everything coming down, you're going to be seeing this behemoth reduced in size to something that we think will serve the community better. We are, as you know, we've begun phase 1. We've done a complete sort of clean out demo of the inside. We are, we have the front part removed. We are doing structural shoring and other reinforcement in preparation to the exciting part, which is to take the middle out so that you can walk through the building in open air all the way to the back. And Karina, if you could go to a plan that shows that. This is what it will end up being as the after to the other before. And as everyone understands, we're doing this in 2 phases. The next 18 months will be the right-hand part of that, which is to build this portion of it, which will contain Seabird public restrooms and open covered wharf that is accessible straight through from the street, basically. And this boardwalk that you see running through goes all the way through to the restaurant, which will open in another 8 months. That is phase 2, or 18 months. That is phase 2. And we are in the design process of refining what those details will look like. So in a nutshell, if you could go to the plan next. This is a diagram that sort of shows how we've broken we will be breaking the complex into 2 very distinct portions. The mouse is the open air area where right off the street, you can walk in open to the sky along the new boardwalk and then into the covered wharf area behind. There'll be coffee and sandwiches to have at the Seabird Outpost, which is right here, and public restrooms available, and that will be phase 1. Phase 2, which comes 18 months after that's complete, is the new restaurant in the back, basically in the old Atlantica dining room, which will be served by the covered wharf with public access to the water. And then the kitchen will remain in the same spot that the kitchen's in. An exciting development since the last time we presented any of this publicly is that we think we have uncovered the other side of the original Hugo's fireplace, which was really exciting to me because all the historic photographs that you see of everybody's wedding and everything has all kinds of pictures in front of that. And I think it will be wonderful to reintroduce that back into the community for those that will remember it and for people to make new memories around it. So, in a nutshell, we've been through all of the conservation, zoning, and planning town reviews. We have, we're working the contractor's working meticulously with conservation to create the right outrigging to protect the harbor with the right openings of netting that will gather all the debris so that the kind of destruction that happens to our waterways when construction happens won't be happening on this. We're being very, very carefully self-contained. So this diagram here, and then I'll open it up to questions, is the diagram of what the inside of the plan will be. The orange area will be area where you can walk outdoors. So if you begin your journey into the complex, right now that thing sort of bowed here and you would have walked in here. Right now there'll be much more open area here and you will walk into this open air walkway and out into the covered wharf. Again, the covered wharf will serve the coffee shop, which will be Seabird with limited sandwich offerings. A public restroom open to anyone who wants to use it at any time during the day, serving the whole harbor, and an undetermined, very small retail outlet here. So in about 18 months, all of this from this line over will be online. There is a dock here that will it will literally be the same dock as there was before. It will go down to the float here in the same configuration that we had it before, no more, no less. There are some renderings that have been, some sort of artistic renderings that went around that showed a much more expansive dock than we ever intend to permit or install. Again, it's just this idea that you can come down the open air walkway and onto the dock that way. So that is that's the overview of where we are, and I welcome anyone's questions.
Susan, just to play it back, and I know you're not defined on the schedule, but it sounds like the right-hand side, we may expect to be able to enjoy that starting in the summer of 2025.
That's the
And
goal.
then,
Yep.
and then the left-hand side could be as soon as summer of 2026, or maybe even after that.
That's exactly right.
And could you maybe just expand a little bit? When 2 years ago, I remember talking about the Lobster Pound, and you didn't necessarily have anybody to run it, but the Lobster Pound, that's still part of the plan. And is there any further thought on that?
Well, we continue, the development team continues to be very open to continuing to refine what that is, how the space is laid out. As the architect, I'm not as equipped as Eamon would be to describe what the operational logistics of that are, but we have reserved a 676 square foot area with an overhead loading door here that can be configured in ways that we think make a lot of sense for the retail provision of seafood. So if Karina, do you want to add into that?
I just wanted to add that the Ryan Akuri from the owner's side has been working with representatives from the lobster community of how to channel in harbor water to fill the tanks. And so we're trying to get the specifications right to get the lobster pound operational, similar to what is going on at the previous lobster pound, not in the same scale, but on a smaller scale, but just to sort of get the details right for whoever takes over the lobster pound.
Yeah. And my name's Susan Hoadley. If anyone wants to contact me with feedback or input, we remain open to continue to have meetings to make this space what it needs to be.
Let me just ask in the room, what questions do you have?
Hey, Susan, Martin St. John here. I'm just curious, the dock that you just referenced,
Yes.
is that going to be open for people that are coming in that just want to stop off, whether they grab something to eat or a coffee, or is that going to turn into what we see in front of the old Salt House, which is completely private sort of dockominiums, or is it going to be transient and service people that, because right now, coming into Cohasset Harbor, it is not a friendly place for people that want to go ashore, and whether they want to go to lunch or go into town or use this facility as you're building here. Will that dock be open to transient boaters from Cohasset as well as other places?
Well, as the architect, I can tell you that it's designed to be either without the representative from the development team. I don't want to represent how that will be open and closed because I don't know. But there will be a dock that is connected to the covered wharf.
And Susan, what phase does that dock fit into for this project?
That dock can hook right back in as soon as phase 1 is finished.
Okay. What other questions are there?
Susan, can you talk about the Salt House? Because that's such a cool historic part and I see it still attached.
So Susan, the lighter area, the lighter gray is not part of our property. So we don't know, I don't know, other than the fact that we've been really, really rigorous about fire separation between those two spaces, which we didn't have before. It's two different owners, the Salt House and in our area. So it's actually not in my project. What I do know about it is that it's I assume that it's going to continue to design and run the way that it has. And that's how we've configured the building anyway.
Susan, maybe just expanding on that, in our site visit, it was very helpful to see. And maybe if Corinna, could you highlight where the kitchen, which is now an empty space, where the kitchen for the Salt House, the space for that is now allocated? So the Salt House building, which is to the left of what you're showing, that's still a fine building. But what Corinna is now circling is an empty space that is, I guess, has an easement from the Salt House, as I understand it.
Yes.
And that it will, at some point, they will build a kitchen in that space to service the Salt House. Is that accurate, Susan?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Excellent. What other questions are there?
I just have a quick one. Good evening, Susan. Thanks for doing this presentation. Lisa Hewitt. The parking, I know that area, even though it was always private property, was frequently used for people just to pull over and look at the view. Is it going to be regulated parking, or will it still be available to people, that to pull in?
So, Karina, do you wanna address this one?
Hi, Lisa. So given, as as we all know, that parking is so scarce on the harbor.
Mm.
And in order for us on this project at 46 Border Street to get our approved parking count, we could only specify a specific amount of seating to equal what available parking that we could fit on the site.
Mhm.
Therefore, anyone who is to park in the parking lot has to be a patron of the site. And how that's going to be regulated by the owner, I don't know the specifics of it, but in order to park there, you have to be a patron of the site.
Thanks for bringing that up, Lisa, because you know that I'm one that's always parked my dad there at the edge of the water to look out at it. I'm wondering if there could be one handicap spot that could be available to that.
No,
And then the other thing is, I wonder if I understand there's regulations that are, you know, all you lawyer people can deal with, but what about valet parking? Because it seems like if you're going to come to a restaurant, you can drop your car, have some lovely teenage kid drive your car somewhere else and then bring it to you at the end of the night. It increases business for youngsters in town, and it makes less parking area and cars peopling the waterfront.
and Susan, that's a fantastic idea, and we've floated it in front of zoning, and we actually are using valet as part of our parking count to allow for staff parking. So in order for us to meet our required parking, we've satisfied the spaces at site, but in order to completely fulfill our required parking, we are utilizing valet parking in order to completely satisfy staff and patrons
Off-site.
off-site. And the owner actually has
Can you show it?
I'm going to show you an image. The owner actually has an electric shuttle that I'm sure he'll be using beyond just parking for employees. I think that when there's the demand of people needing to park off site, it's likely that he will extend the electric shuttle to bring people to the site. The biggest challenge of this project was trying to satisfy parking. And based on the zoning bylaws and the planning requirements for parking, it was a huge challenge. And what was there before with the Atlantica, with its 300 people occupancy, and how that was still allowed, with people still being able to drive and watch this, look out over the harbor. That's no longer valid. We have half of the occupancy of what used to be there, but because this is a new project, now we have to follow the current bylaws. And that forces the current owner to have to put restrictions on the parking because we have to satisfy those bylaws.
Yeah, the thumbnail takeaway of the whole parking exercise is that we have less occupancy to account for with parking and a more regulated and deliberate strategy for addressing it. So parking will improve
Susan,
from the condition of when the last time that this facility was open.
Thank you.
Susan,
We'll just take 2 more minutes and then we'll move on, but go ahead, Mike.
Susan, can you just explain the shared parking concept relative to the occupants of the building?
Do you want to go back to? Well, it's a very long,
In a nutshell,
yeah, Karina.
in a nutshell, we understand that we have let's see, I don't have the numbers completely off the top of my head, but the way that we've made it work is that the coffee shop and the fine dining won't be operational at the same time.
Yep.
So during the day between, 7 a.m. till 3, the coffee shop and retail and the covered wharf will have enough parking in the parking lot.
And that's shown at the table to the right.
And that shows in the table to the right, actually 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. daytime parking. And then in the afternoon, after 3, the coffee shop is going to be closed. And then that's when fine dining steps in, is able to utilize the parking that's available.
So, you might see cars in there more. The parking lot will be all, nearly full, ideally. A lot. As opposed to the unworkable, empty all the time, except when there's 300 people there, model that Atlantica ended on.
But the parking lot is not designed for total building capacity. We're only able to make it work, and it just by the nature of the two businesses working different hours, is that the coffee shop has the parking during the day, and then when it's shut, the fine dining comes in and is able to utilize the parking.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Susan and Corinna, we have one question that's come in online.
What will occupy the retail space? Is it gonna be one store or more than one?
Just one.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's only 930 square feet.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for this. This is really helpful to see the plan.
Good. It was,
And
thank you for coming to our tour last week. It was great to get feedback from everyone.
and actually, if you're welcome to stay on. Our next agenda item is just to allow folks who are able to attend those site visits to share any feedback they want, both of Cohasset Wharf and of the Harbor Cohasset, just to get the new terminology. And I guess I'd offer to people who are on the site visit, Mike, Martin.
I asked my question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that, this is Mike Sardina. I think that the wonderful thing that is happening for the harbor is, this project, opens up some of its space to the public, and it makes the spaces, much more enjoyable as a result of, having that access to the water's edge. The condominium project, that we walked, just this past week, has almost 50 feet or more of distance from the actual seawall back to varying dividing lines of what's private and what's public. So the whole property is private, but the first 50 to 75 feet is going to be available to the public. Lawns, benches, 20 feet of a promenade. They call it a boardwalk, but it's basically pavers. And this is something that the harbor has never had, this kind of access, except just down where the little pavilion is there. And Government Island, of course, having it over by the sailing club. So I think that these two developers have done a marvelous job of giving something back to the community that I think is gonna reap way more benefits than we could have imagined. And the only thing I can say is I think it's gonna be so successful that there's gonna be a great deal of pressure on powers that be to add parking on Elm Street, Cove Street, and Margin Street, where there is room for it.
Thank you, Mike. Lisa, Susan, anything else? You don't have to.
Yeah,
Just making sure you're heard.
Sure, thank you. I unfortunately couldn't make the tour of this area, this project, but I driven by every morning. So, but it's I'm just thrilled that the style of it is very in keeping with our community. I can't wait for it to be done and to walk over and have coffee. is concerning the condo development. I was really taken aback by how much room, as Mike just mentioned, that the boardwalk is going to have. It truly won't be just like this little trail that you have running by someone's condo development. It is big enough to have lots of people be able to walk around the harbor, especially, that area with that vision and viewpoint. So, yeah, it was great. Thank you, George, for organizing the tour.
And I'll add that along with this momentum, the Historic Commission, of which Martin is a member, and along with Jackie Dormitzer, are going to be redoing the signage for the Captain's Walk with much more prominent, readable, 18 by 24-inch signs that are updated, and I think will give a much more impactful view of the history of Cohasset. That Brian Joyce is involved with her on that, and some of those signs, if things go right, could actually be installed starting this summer as well. And that's, in cooperation with Susan and the Cohasset Wharf Project, as well as with Ted Lubitz and the Harbor Cohasset Project, where there's signs adjacent to or on those properties. So I think that's to the momentum that Mike spoke of. I think we're going to see good momentum in the harbor for people to walk around it.
So I can share that the obvious thing that struck me is that, wow, this is the perfect place to access the harbor from. And they said that it's definitely not in their plans right now, basically because that would be too thorny of an issue to get cleared. But it will be coming down the pike. It will. It's just a gorgeous place to access the harbor. It's all muddy and weird at low tide. So in the future, I'm sure that little black fence will be leading down to some sort of docks and dockage. It's not, just to be clear, it's not part of the current Cove project, but, you'd be a fool not to think that that's going to happen in the future. So I think that we should, as Harbor Committee, we should think about what's best for residents accessing the harbor, which segues you well into the recreation survey discussion. But I think that, I know that it's been really frustrating, particularly for architects, to hear all of our complaints. But this is, this is really nice that they've just come up with that. It has that access for residents. And I think that us being, whether we're contentious or whether we're contributing brilliant ideas or however we come across, it's really a valuable part of the planning and the development of this harbor. And it's our job as members of this committee to represent the residents who live in Cohasset of all varieties, not just people who can afford fancy condos in those few realms.
Go ahead, Susan Hoadley.
Yeah, so the process that we've gone through has been really fulfilling in the way we've been able to engage so many people. In a way, this project kind of designed itself in that way, almost in the way that the sailing club did. And when I say that, I mean that, I could take you through this plan and, and explain the authorship of 70 or 80 different parties and individuals that came, that talked to us in hearings and individually and so forth over the course of designing this. And, Susan, you've been really helpful too. And your explanation of the value of the edge along, using my mouse along this edge, we bore it in mind and kept that line of parking, sort of sacrosanct, so that it's known that people can come and look at the water from that area. You asked actually, and I didn't answer it. The handicap parking spot are right here and right here. So there are two that, one of which is sort of the primo spot to look out at the harbor at.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this. We're running a little behind. I hope probably about another 15 minutes. But thank you again, Susan. And we'll look forward to continued conversations with you and your team as this continues to develop. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
The next topic is the Cohasset Harbor Recreation Survey Launch Plan. If you could bring up this document.
Yeah.
There's actually, this is a sort of a conversation to this committee. So I think Susan and Lisa and I have been working on this recreation survey. We're excited about the potential for it. I think it's in a good state in that it's a survey that is, I think, will be easy to answer. And we have a number of expected answers to get, but we're also very open and encouraging of respondents to include things that we haven't thought of.
And we also need to thank Montana has been fantastic with helping us develop this.
Yes. Thank you, Montana. If you could scroll down anyway, just to start with, so it's a very short, actually keep to the top. What we're going to be sending around town via email, print publications, and posters at town hall is that very top thing. Cohasset Harbor Recreation Survey. There's a QR code. You could probably do it today. You can look at something like that. It'll bring up the QR code and you can actually see the survey on your smartphone, just like that, by pointing at that QR code. We're going to put those in town hall at Wilka Commons, other places, and then we want to send that via email. So the ask to this team is, now let's go down just a little bit to the survey distribution, is starting in early March. By the way, early March is Friday. Just putting a point on that. We want to start leveraging the email newsletters from all the harbor related organizations. So Sean, if you're still there, you're at the top of the list and you're awesome with emails. Doesn't necessarily need to be a dedicated email, but when is appropriate, we would love to see that blurb about the Cohasset Harbor Rec Survey show up in a newsletter from the Sailing Club. Likewise, Susan, I know you're already on this. Next time you're sending an email appropriately to your population, we'd love that bit of text and the QR code to show up in an email from you guys. Lisa, I'm asking you for CMI to work with our administrators there to do the same. And then Martin, if you're in a position to do it, same thing for the yacht club. The survey is available to anybody who uses Cohasset Harbor. There's a question in it. We've gone through this last month, so I'm not going to look at the question itself, but are you a Cohasset resident or not? That's a top question, but we're certainly interested in the opinions of people who come to Cohasset Harbor, but are not necessarily residents, where they may keep a boat on a mooring here and they're not residents. That's fine. We want everybody who wants to answer this.
Jack Buckley has his hand raised. Do you want me to?
Sure. Ask the question, yeah.
Jack, we can hear you.
Unless he's on mute.
Maybe not.
You know, I may have my computer on mute. Or no, that wouldn't
It
make
should
any
come through
difference.
the,
Okay.
here, I'm just gonna.
Can we hear Jack?
Jack, we can't hear you.
He's coming.
Okay.
Sorry, I now see something that I didn't see before. I was just going to make a suggestion, but you've already covered it, so I apologize.
Well, glad to have your engagement, Jack. So we have, again, sort of going through, I guess I'll follow up with an email, but I'm making the ask now to the members of the committee to start thinking about getting this done. The survey as of today is live. So any answers that go in, we're no longer in test mode, it's live, and we'll take that. I will point out that there was during the testing, we had a limiter on there that helps protect the survey by making, you have to have a Google account. But then it stops anybody who doesn't have a Google account.
I don't.
Well, it can, but
Okay.
I don't know if you've tried the survey.
I haven't tried it.
Okay, well,
But I
you
saw
probably
it.
would have been prevented from doing it. The upshot of it is we've removed that, so the survey is a little less protected. But as a result of that, we're also, I don't want to distribute it via social media. It's like, it's going to be out there enough, but we don't want it on social media. Because then it, we run the risk of getting spammed. I mean, it's sort of a good problem to have. A lot of people want to hit a survey. Usually that's a problem. But anyway, we're not going to social media. We're going via email. We're going, so I will be following up with Cohasset Education Foundation, which has good email lists. Lori, I'll be hoping to work with you to get out the survey to the mooring list. And then the public schools, Susan, I know you mentioned Brian Scott. I don't know if you're in a position to help with that.
Yeah, I can ask him. I see that we're missing the senior center, not the Wilcott Commons, but the senior housing. And those people are really, their voices really need to be in because
Okay.
if they're already a little, find it a little difficult already, though, that's the kind
Well-
of information we really need, because if we're not serving them, we're not ADA compliant in law or
So,
in spirit.
Susan, I added to the list and I'm going to put your name at the top of the list to help get that done as well.
Okay, and Avalon is another one. I mean, we gotta reach out. Diversity.
No,
It can't be
I'm-
just us
that's why
clubby, sailing, rowing, lobstering types.
Oh, I know. Good. So definitely open to that. I see those, not so much on websites, but with flyers, with the QR code. Again, QR code can be a little bit tough for the seniors. I did talk with the Wilcott Commons, and we're hoping to be able to go to Cohasset Cafe on Monday mornings and
Right.
help people with the survey. And I've talked with, they have the Cohasset Vista is a print publication. The Cohasset Rec Fair has print publication. And the Cohasset Rec is doing it. Still just starting the discussion with Cohasset Vista to make sure it works for them. They manage that closely. And then we're going to put it on the homepage for the Harbor Committee and maybe on the homepage broader on the Cohasset website. These are just ideas. We want to get it out there and it's make it as available as possible. I think we expect to keep the survey open through early May, and we'll just see how it goes. Any questions? So the last ask is, we'd love to have you guys hit the survey and fill it out when you see it. Perfect. The final topic we have on the agenda is a follow-up from our previous meeting about the proposed Mariners Park dock extension and Government Island Pier. And to that end, in the minutes, I included a picture of the pier. If you could bring up the minutes. And so while we're waiting to bring up a picture, there it is, not waiting for long. We presented this last January. I tried to represent it. Lori wasn't here. But maybe if you could just, can I ask you, Lori, to just give a brief summary of the thinking for this pier? And then we'll have a Q&A as appropriate.
Well, it's not a pier, it's
I'm sorry, a dock
expansion.
extension, yeah.
At about 100 feet or so. Angle it so that we don't have to do any dredging behind it. I have the dock held by pilings. And the dock that I'd be adding on would be lower, would not be as high. So it would be easier for the CMI boats to be able to pull up to it and load and offload people on those at 100 feet.
As well as stand-up paddle boards, kayaks, any
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
lower,
but,
lower
you know.
boat. Yeah,
I know they have a real problem.
yeah.
CMI has a problem with their boats because our docks are so high.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
This would be
that.
a lot lower.
Yep.
And if we were able to do this, then probably my thought is to, everybody who has a dinghy would have an assigned spot.
Mhm.
And then you can tie up tight. We don't have them all over the place. And they can, but do it on all the docks.
Mhm.
Not just this dock.
And this would be on the back side, the land,
Yes, it has to
land
be on the
side.
backside, yeah, the land side.
Could you describe the potential engineering aspect of this that would be involved to move it forward?
We would have to have this held by pilings. So they have to do test borings. They probably have to do about 3. They come in, or they, by land, they bring a barge, put it together. On the boat ramp, and then with their equipment, and then do the borings. To see if we can get the pilings down far enough. Now, when this dock was originally built. In like 2001. It was held by pilings. But it only went to, the pilings only went as deep as resistance would allow. I haven't been able to find anything that shows that test borings were done. So the pilings were only in about 4 feet.
Ooh.
The first winter the ice came in, knocked them down. So since then, it's all been held with moorings, 8 moorings. And it moves around all over the place, because it's hard to hold something with the moorings when all the weight is on one side.
Hmm.
It's not like you've got a dock and like the sailing club docks.
Mhm.
You've got moorings on each end, so it doesn't swing. Here, the moorings are really only on one side because you've got the boat ramp there. And especially now with the longer boat ramp.
Mm.
And so in a final installation, then the pilings might be of the same size and dimension as at the Cohasset Marina.
Probably.
Pretty substantial.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah.
Mhm.
Cause, that, we've been lucky, we haven't had ice in the last
Mm.
2 or 3 years, but that area can ice up very thick.
I mean, it knocked everything, Snowmageddon knocked it all over at the marina.
Yes, yes, he had to replace 11 pilings.
Yeah.
At, Cohasset Harbor Marina.
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
few years back.
I believe it knocked over the, the yacht club.
Yep.
Yeah, it did the yacht club too.
Yes,
So-
yes.
So that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do in the future.
And then I'll just share what Lori and I were discussing. This is completely dependent on funding,
Right.
like everything else is in the harbor. This funding is all local. There's no Seaport Economic Council or anything involved in this. That way Cohasset keeps full control and all kinds of stuff. The funding, if it were to happen, starts with a small appropriation out of capital budget
Right.
that would happen, under the guidance of Chris Senior and Michelle Leary in capital budget. That gets approved at annual meeting whenever that happens.
Mhm.
And then that's only a small part of it. The rest of it has to be funded most likely through a request to the CPC, which again is an if, not a given.
But they've been very generous in the past.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I think
Lauren,
that's- I think, yeah, I think it's,
So
I think that's why
let me
they're-
take Mike first, then Susan. Mike?
no, I think the CPC, I think it's great that the survey is going out because basically it's gonna
Mhm.
really nail down the recreational aspect of the responses And CPC is all about recreation and a couple of other funding opportunities. That's all they can do. So it's
We
probably
will have-
very timely for the survey.
Yeah. Susan,
I was just gonna say something similar and hope that we got the questions right to support you in that, Lori.
I don't know,
Time will
never,
tell.
I mean,
I-
as
I know that-
Susan,
I
we-
know-
never saw the survey.
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
I think we did our best and we definitely sort of have a leading question. One of the key questions in the survey is the open question, what else could improve recreation in Cohasset Harbor? And that is, we're expecting people who really care to expound upon some of the set answers that we have included.
If pilings don't work for that, can moorings do it?
No, this doesn't do it now. It moves too much.
Well, I don't know if you put more moorings, if you had a longer dock with more moorings.
I got 8 on.
Hmm?
See, how long is it? The run is about 56 feet long and the main is 12
Yeah.
feet wide, so I've got 8 on those right now and
It still moves.
still moves too much.
Will this help to meet recreational needs or improve?
Oh, I would,
Can you actually get more boats down there than already are?
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we'd be able to add.
I mean, it's using space that is currently not being
It's
used
good
in the
space.
harbor.
That's good.
And Lori, what is the water depth on the land side at low tide?
On a regular low tide, there's a couple of feet in there. On a minus tide.
Yeah.
You might have to wait
Right,
a little bit.
little
but-
money.
That's Cohasset Harbor.
Yeah, exactly. George, I have just a quick question, and maybe no one has the answer, but I know CPC is basically funded through real estate transactions, and that has really plummeted in the last year and a half because of interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. Do we presently have any money in CPC?
Yeah, we do,
Okay,
because we pay it on our real estate tax,
right,
pay a fee, so. Yeah, no, there is money there.
I mean,
good.
anybody
Yeah.
who's a student of town meeting knows that is the big
Yeah,
pot
that's
of
the
money
only pot of money that's easily
everybody
available.
sees. But
Right, yeah.
this is a, is a good case and we
Sure.
expect we really did design. I mean, Noel, I'll give you credit. The survey came out of discussions about dock and more dock space. And I think it's come a long way. This is moving independently of that, but I think our expectation is we will see a lot of interest in this, but survey says.
Yep.
Whatever survey says. What other questions?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Noel.
I guess my biggest concern is if there's gonna be adequate water at low tide. I know, 2 years ago when I started pushing the pier plan around, I started with Lori. My understanding at the time, after one conversation, was that difficulty of adding moorings in the harbor was, it was difficult to do that without intruding into the mooring field,
Mhm.
which is something that the Army Corps, I guess, is opposed to. So the threshold question is, does this represent an intrusion into the?
No, doesn't,
Well, that's a huge plus,
it's not part of the navigation
huge plus,
project.
huge plus. And what about, you have to move some boat moorings?
The dock that you see there, that'll be swung around 180 degrees. And the boat closest to the dock will go where the end of the dock is now.
Which are you referring to? What dock swings 180?
There's a small finger float there.
Oh, to the left of the red line.
That'll swing around
Okay,
towards the sailing club.
okay,
And then the boat, the right-hand boat will be moved up to where the end of the dock is.
okay.
And obviously, if dredging is required, that's probably fatal to any funding mechanism through a town meeting. So is there any chance, is there a likelihood?
Oh, no, I don't. For this, we wouldn't have to, because it's gonna be angled out.
Okay.
So it'll be out in deeper water. it'll be angled out, starting at the main. You know, 10 degrees, whatever, I don't know, the degrees necessary.
It's all good news, huh?
Wait, so then this picture should be revised to show that, right?
Well, I can't take the dock apart to make the angle.
Yeah.
Maybe when we get into a drawing with the engineer, he can do something.
Photoshop it, yeah.
So I mean, this is again, completely
It's conceptual,
depending on a few funding
Yeah.
sources, but again, a credit to Lori and Noel and other people who have advocated for having more space where we can find it in the harbor. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Any other questions on this? Are there any other topics that folks would like to raise before we close? Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Have a good night.